I'm Dirk Verbeuren, drummer for Megadeth, Cadaver, and studio drummer.
Hi, my name is Untitled Chapter. I'm a producer, recording, mixing, and mastering engineer. The ultimate goal here was to record Dirk's drums for the new Cadaver album using only real drum sounds without any samples.
I went to Adair and said, hey, we actually had quite a long discussion about this, like, you can do whatever you need to do, but I want real drums.
First, I'm going to show you how I used Waves plugins while tracking Dirk's drums so he can hear everything clearly and play more consistently, even during the blast beat.
In that sense, the mix was really important because once I got comfortable with those levels, it allowed me to kind of find my comfort zone and be like, okay, this is how I'm going to be performing everything, That allowed me then to really just kind of forget about all that stuff and perform the songs.
And in the second part of this video, I'm going to show you the plugins I use for the final mix to make the tracks even more clean and prepared for the amount of compression and limiting that happens during the mastering. Let me start here with Dirk's mix, with what is happening on the bass drum. First, I have the SSL channel that is EQing a lot, just to make it more clear for Dirk to listen what he's doing. And I have the gate engage here too, not all the way. This way I can still listen a little bit to the bleeding from the rest of the stuff. It makes more precise. Then comes this Mac attack just to make it really punchy, and that's what we were talking about, having the mix for the drummer in a way that it's better for him to do not put so much effort to play the fastest parts, and also sounds really great. And that's it. Let's jump to the snare. There's a little bit of the bass drum, a little bit of the cymbals. Let me engage everybody here. So again, I have the SSL channel. The main thing is to have a lot of attack from the snare. This way the drummer, when he's playing, he feels a lot more comfortable. He doesn't have to hit that hard to get that sound that he really wants, And that for sure increases the performance when especially drummers are playing like stuff really, really fast, So here it is again, without smack attack and with it. It adds like a lot more punch to it, Here are the settings with the smack attack. Here on the snare, I'm not using it as an expander like I did with the bass drum. Makes a lot of difference. Okay, all right. Let me jump here to the snare bottom. That here I'm only using the SSL channel with the amazing preset from CLA, the snare bottom preset. The natural sound is like this. On the snare bottom, it's the only track that I do the exactly opposite of what I'm doing on the bass drum and on the snare, because basically sometimes there is a lot of fills or details or even ghost notes that it will come from the snare bottom. So on the snare bottom, I'm trying to make the signal like a lot more like a sausage, I don't want too many dynamics from the snare bottom, and I don't mind having a lot of bleeding from it, It's because when you mix both together, and this is really important, especially for the blast beats, Most of the details from blast beats and with low dynamic parts comes from the snare bottom, So basically that's pretty much it, really easy. Now let me play for you like the bass drum and the snare top and bottom together, like. So basically, this way, the only cymbals that Dirk is hearing comes from the overheads, where the cymbals are the best, you know, and they're really clean and beautiful. Let me show you how it works. When I add the overheads, most of the cymbals comes from there, you know, and in the overheads I'm using C4, you know, my favorite plugin ever for overheads. This way I can like compress the high end a little bit more than the low end and have the cymbals a little bit more even, you know. This is basically what Dirk is listening when he's playing. Mostly he's listening to the snare and the bass drum and a little bit of the overheads. He's also listening to the toms a lot, and now I will show you how I set up the gate for the toms, which is a really nice trick. Here on the toms, let me show first how they sound without any plugin. As you can hear, there's a lot of cymbals on the toms, you know. Let me show here with the plugins engaged. And let me show what is happening here. These are the plugins that I'm using on the toms. Like I have one CLA mix hub and one SSL channel mono. Let me show first the SSL. I'm gating a little bit, adding some top end, low end, and cutting the low mids like on 500 hertz, and using obviously the gate, you know. So the CLA mix hub here is the key. That's the best part of all. As you can see here on track 10, I have this extra snare channel that is here only to send the signal to the CLA mix hub. And I'm using here the external side chain just so the CLA mix hub can duck the snare out of the tom. This way I can have the gating for toms. I can have the gate a lot more precise, you know. Here is how it sounds like. We have like a lot less cymbals on the toms. It's not 100% perfect. There is still a little bit of leakage, but that's totally fine for the recording. When we are recording, not only Dirk can judge better his performance, but also we can hear the toms like really loud, you know, almost as if we were listening to a final mix. Like. So, and that's the way I set up the session for tracking, you know. As you can see, the CLA mix hub ducking the snare out of the toms, like in the SSL channel, gating everything and EQing a little bit just to give more details for Dirk. And mainly the smack attack to give that punch on the bass drum and the snare, just so Dirk can feel more comfortable and listen to every hit as if he was punching someone. As you can see, like I was having an incredible sound from the tracking session, but it's still, since the drums has to compete with all the rest of the stuff, I have to process the drums a lot more in order to make them punchier and to make everything clear on the mix. You know, every single hit needs to be appear like here, you know. So basically, this is the sound that I was having for tracking. And this is how it sounds on the final mix. As you can hear on the final mix, I have a lot more details and punch from the drums, you know. So let me show you track by track what is happening here. I'm using basically the stuff that I used for the tracking session, plus a bunch of other plugins to make everything even more powerful and clean, you know. So let me start here with the bass drum. All the plugins that were inserted on the tracking session are here already freezed. I freezed those tracks. And on top of that, I added another SSL channel. And here I'm using it to EQ more. And I'm gating a little bit. I'm doing exactly the same thing for the other bass drum track. And I'm sending these two bass drum tracks to the channel 19. And here on the channel 19, I have these plugins. I have the SSL EQ Mono, SSL Comp Stereo, L2, and C4. Let me show how it sounds without all of these guys. Like. Sounds a lot more punchy, at the same time clean, right? The SSL comp, it's here just because I like the sound of it. The L2 is really important because it makes the bass drums to sound like a lot more solid, you know, and that's really important to make the bass drums stand out in the entire mix, you know. And here I have a C4, which is really important because when I have parts like this, with a lot of bass drum hits, you know, I need the C4 to cut out of the low end a little bit, because otherwise it's gonna be really muddy on the mix and it's gonna be difficult to manage, you know, if you have too much low end, you know. And that's it for the bass drum. On the snare top, again, I freezed all the plugins I had on the tracking session, and I'm adding these guys here. I have another SSL channel. He's here just for a little bit of EQing. And I have another smack attack just so I can have a lot more punch. And I have the CLA mix hub, again, as you can see here, like compressing the hell out of it. It's here basically for even more compression. My favorite EQ for surgical EQing, it's cutting the ring out of the snare. And I have the Waves NLS channel just to work a little bit like the L2 on the bass drum to make the snare to sound more even, you know. And I really like the spike mode because it makes the snare to sound even more aggressive. So let me show you how it sounds without it. The snare sounds even more clean, you know. And the idea here, unlike the tracking session where when I was still having a little bit of leakage from the snare, here the idea is to do not have any leakage when the snare is playing, you know. And here's the snare bottom. As you can see, sounds not as dirty as the tracking session, because since after I finish the tracking, I will work a lot on the snare bottom, on details and everything. So here I don't actually need the snare bottom to be messy like on the tracking session, you know. As you can see, the SSL channel is compressing. And here it's just some EQ to get out of the muddy sound from the snare. Let me play snare top and snare bottom together, like. So the idea is to have the snare sounding really clear and punchy, you know. It's really important to do not have any leakage from the cymbals, you know. Let me play with the bass drum. Let me play here the blast beat. Or here the fill. Let me show you the overheads. Basically what is happening here, I have the same plugin, the C4, with just a few adjustments. I end up like cutting a little bit more of the low end, and I'm adding this Renaissance EQ here just to cut a lot from the cymbals in general, because as Dirk said, he wanted these drums to sound a little bit old school, you know, and brightness is not the best thing to have when you want stuff old school to sound old school, you know, like. So basically that's how it sounds without anything. Sounds really dark, but that's the way it was a lot better to do not have the cymbals like harshing the entire mix, you know. So let me play everybody together for you guys. On top of everything that I did, that I was using on the tracking session, I have here on the final mix this room track. I was starting to run out of channels, you know, for the drum recording. I recorded the room mics in mono, you know. And here on the final mix, I have all these plugins here. And the first plugin I have is the Abbey Road Chambers with my preset on it, like add room to your room. This plugin is here to make the room mic to sound bigger and in stereo, you know. That's a big thing for me with the Abbey Road Chambers, because you can record in mono and then you can have a really decent and incredible stereo signal stereo track for the rooms, you know, with it, you know. So let me show you how it sounds without anything. Like, sounds a lot bigger, right? And on top of the Abbey Road chambers, doing the magic, I have obviously CLA drums on the room setting, C4, and all these Renaissance EQs here that are doing this crazy stuff just because on the workflow, that's what happens sometimes. Instead of going here and adding more stuff on this one, I just add another one and do it, and then add another one and cut more stuff or boost stuff or whatever. So here it is, the final mix with the room mics and without it. So basically it adds like a lot of mid-range, you know, and glues all the drums together, you know. So those were the stuff that I did for the final mix. And again, let me show you how it was sounding only with the plugins on the tracking session. And here is the final mix. As you can see, it's a lot of effort, a lot of plugins, a lot of stuff to do to get the natural sound from the drums in the mix. I hope that this video will encourage every mixer, metal mixer, recording engineer in the world to use the actual natural sound of the drums in the final mix. Let's see if we can make drummers happy, not using samples and using their hands in the final mix. That's it. See you next time, guys.